Fatagan. What a wonderful phrase. Cthulhu Fatagan. Ain't no passing craze. It means no worries for the rest of your days. It's my philosophy. Cthulhu Fatagan. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Fluffenhammer. Roll the music!
Every man lives, not every man truly dies. I must feed from the depths of hell.
Guns might be that way. Let's go the other way.
Hello! Oh! Yes. Fabulous. It's so nice to be back.
We are returned.
Yeah. From our brief banishment to the warp. I don't know what I did to upset them. That's what annoys me. I don't know what I did to upset the Tzeentch and Slaanesh. I've been doing everything they told me to do.
I think that's the problem, is you don't do what Tzeentch tells you to do.
No, that's a fair point, actually. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's it. Maybe I should just start rebelling a bit more. Go Araman on his ass, you know?
Just go, but don't go full Araman. You should
never go full
Araman.
No, because that way lies absolute misery. Insofar as I can see, the guy is like one of the most miserable characters in all of 40k, which is ironic when you've got characters like Mortarion and Typhus rolling around. You'd think they would be, wouldn't you? But they seem quite happy.
Well, they do, but an idea appears in my mind. And we haven't done the introductions yet, so we'll get back to that in a second. But an idea rolls around in my mind. Which would be worse, going full Araman or going full Fabius?
I don't know. I mean, Fabius seems to enjoy his work more than Araman does.
That's true. He does take joy in his day-to-day.
He does. Araman is a misery gut, always. And he's very deathly serious, is Araman. You know, there's no sense of humour there at all. Whereas Fabius, I mean, you do have to contend with a few things if you're going full Fabius. The fact that he is in pain all the time. I mean, if you've read the Fabius Bile books, you know that Fabius is actually prey to a genetic disease. He's ill all the time, basically. He is in a perpetual state of dying. So you've got to contend with that. But, as I say, he actually does enjoy what he does. He gets some pleasure out of life, out of eternity, in fact. Whereas Araman really doesn't. He really doesn't. You get the impression that even if he got what he wanted or what he proclaims to want, he'd still be miserable.
Would he be miserable, or would he just be that little bit less morose? There's the question. You know, it's like Araman. Araman is the galactic version of the guy at a house party who spends his time in the kitchen talking about mortgages.
Yeah, you know what he is? He's the covert narcissist, is Araman.
Yeah.
He's the covert narcissist. He's the guy who actually doesn't have it that bad at all, you know, who actually has quite a lot going on for him, but whinges about it.
Are you saying that Araman is in fact the nascent phase of the chaos god of the emo movement?
Pretty much, yeah.
All right.
He's like, you know, he's the kind of guy who, you know, gets a new kitchen installed or something and it's absolutely beautiful and then whinges about everything. You know, it's like, Araman, come on, man.
I really want to see a TV show called Araman's Kitchen.
Araman's Kitchen, yeah. It'd have a cauldron, wouldn't it? It'd have a cauldron and, you know, lots of alchemical devices scattered about.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah.
Or even better, it's just Araman going around doing DIY for people. And we could call it Araman Alive.
Well, you know about the thing with Araman would be very good at that.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be very good, but it wouldn't be technically DIY because he wouldn't be doing it himself. He'd be like summoning powers and bound demons and things to do it for him. It'd be like the Mickey Mouse sequence from Fantasia, but done well.
With more Charlie Dimmock. Anyhow, moving on swiftly.
Yeah.
Oh, you can tell it's been a while.
Someone's got to animate that. Someone out there in the YouTubes or whatever needs to do that sequence. They need to recreate the Fantasia sequence with Ahriman. That'd be fabulous.
The entirety of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, but with Ahriman. Yeah.
With Ahriman. That would be fantastic.
Oh, but I'd want to hear the music from Bedknobs and Broomsticks playing in the background.
Now, Angela Lansbury as Ahriman. Yeah, that'd be good casting, actually. That would be interesting casting.
We'll say that at this age, she does look like a armour full of dust. Anyhow, moving on swiftly moving. As always, I am Gruffy. I am your host, and with me, as is my joy to announce, is George.
Yes. Oh, I'm so happy to be back. I mean, we've missed a lot.
We have.
We've been away for a while. There has been a lot happening. I mean, as we were discussing before we came on air, the Games Workshop have gone a little crazy again in our absence.
They have. It's like, as they've been rolling along, they've kept the phonetic pacing going, which I'm surprised at alone over the last 3 years, how much that pacing has
it's
not
insane.
died down.
It's mental.
And then all of a sudden, over the last 3 months or so, 2 months, they've just gone, you think that was pacing?
Yeah. You ain't seen nothing. And like the stuff that's still to come as well this year, that they, when there was all that stuff at Nova and there was loads of stuff announced at Nova, apparently all of that is coming this year. All of it.
Yeah, Blackstone Fortress isn't that far away.
Blackstone Fortress, yeah. Wrath and Rapture apparently is this year. Yeah, I mean, we've already had, obviously, the new Kill Team Rogue Trader update.
Yep.
Which was wonderful, by the way.
Yes, and I need that. I need
Me too.
Rogue Trader.
Although, like, in terms of background, that's introduced a really nasty concept, which is the fact that the Jellifields, which keep Imperial ships from being tainted by the warp, can fail now.
That's a new part of the law that wasn't there earlier.
No, I mean, not only can they fail, but they can be tainted. They can actually be utilised against the crew of the ship. So, I mean, this was what was keeping Imperial ships from the warp, from chaos. So, what are they going to do?
Pray, I think, is the only answer to that one.
That's all they can do, really, isn't it? I mean, good God. I mean, I was actually rereading recently, for reasons that might become apparent later down the line, I was rereading the Space Marine Codex, the 8th Ed Space Marine Codex, that has the full spread on the Indomitus Crusade, which was when Robert Gilman became the regent of the Imperium and spread out from Terra with the surviving forces of the Imperium after Cadia and after the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum. And what I really like about it is it would have been so tempting to use that to restore the status quo, for it to be like, oh, new crusade, oh, yes, all the realms of humanity that were taken by chaos and by aliens have been reclaimed, and now the Imperium is back as it was, but it's just got Robert Gilman in it. It would have been so easy to do that, and they didn't. If you read it, it takes pains to point out that the Indomitus Crusade is like a flickering candle in the dark. It spreads out from Terra, and it does reclaim some territories, but not many. It's more a symbolic action than anything. It's more Roboot saying, like, the people of the Imperium, the humanity, and the Space Marine chapters need something. They need something to grasp onto, and that's what the Indomitus Crusade was, because it failed ultimately.
Yeah, it did.
It founders, okay, the Primaris are reborn in it. You get the Ultima founding, but even they're not really enough.
There's I'm trying to remember where it's at, but there's a wonderful bit where it likens the Indomitus Crusade to a pinprick against against a cut throat, and slit the Imperium's throat has been.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. And of course, Robot was forced to abandon it. He didn't have much choice when Mortarion attacked Ultramar. He didn't have any choice. He had to abandon it. And from there, it's kind of faltered. It has allowed a little bit of respite because the newly created Primaris chapters have settled on the worlds that they retook. So there is like a bulwark now. There is some bastion for the forces of humanity around Terra, but it's very small compared to what it used to be. And even that is fractious.
Mm-hmm. I'm still looking forward to seeing what happened with the Tyranid attack on Blood Angels.
Baal, that was actually undone by the... they actually did survive that. That was part of the Indomitus Crusade. They were pressed to the point of absolute extinction until the Flesh Tearers turned up. The Flesh Tearers basically sacrificed themselves, more or less. They do still exist, but there's not many of them left. The Blood Angels themselves were bled almost white. So that's a chapter that consists more of Primaris Marines now than of original Marines. And what happened was Dante was declared the regent of Imperium Nihilus by Robert Guilliman. So you've actually got two regents. You've got Robert Guilliman, who's acting as the regent of Imperium Primaris, and then you've got on the other side of the Cicatrix, you've got Dante acting as the regent of Imperium Nihilus. So there are two strong points, really, from which they can spread out. But
that's a very cool idea.
Isn't it great, eh? And it must... I mean, it does demonstrate that Dante is probably one of the best chapter masters out there. He's probably one of the ones that Robert recognises as like an old-school hero. You know, someone who he could have probably fought alongside back in the days of the Great Crusade. Because you do get the impression with Robert that not many of them are like that. He's not entirely comfortable with a lot of the Space Marines as they've become.
Yeah. All I'm thinking of here at the moment is, Dante has not done bad for himself, has he? Considering he just started out as a named hero in a game of 40k.
Yeah, I know, right?
30 years ago.
I know, he's done rather well, hasn't he? But like Abaddon, needs a new bloody miniature. Needs a new bloody miniature. Oh my god. Dante is like, he looks so old in comparison to all of the other Blood Angels. Well,
he's based on a hero figure from, 1988?
Yeah, I know, right? I know.
At this point.
And you've got things like comparing him to things like, say, the Sanguinor. Which is like, it's beautiful, it's resplendent. It looks like it could be a bloody Primarch, if it was scaled up. It looks like Sanguinius, essentially. It doesn't work. If he's the chapter master, it just doesn't work. He's just too normal looking and too small and But
even against someone like the Marinus Calgar miniature, he looks inornate.
Yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, like Marnius has had a new miniature in the interim, So why hasn't Dante? The same is true of Azrael. There are other characters from the Dark Angels who have had miniatures since then. And comparing him to them, it's like, God, that's the chapter master, really? It's like, okay. Fair enough. There are now basic lords or basic captains that look better than him.
Yeah.
That look more the part than he does.
Oh, well, you know what that means, don't you? Conversions!
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's the only way forward to make Dante and Abaddon not look like tiny little people.
Although, I'm sure it will happen. I'm sure, when they roll around to maybe next year, because by the time next year rolls around, I imagine they're going to start redoing some of the codices, the 8th edition codices.
Yes.
Chaos is a shoo-in. With the new range that's coming, that we know is coming.
Yeah.
Chaos is a shoo-in. I think that probably there's going to be a Chaos Space Marine Codex, a new one, very soon. Very, very soon.
I think a lot of the ones that got half updated, the ones that was just basically taking the last edition and just throwing some new rules in, they've been done purely to get them on the shelves.
I think so too. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're very good. They're very good books, but I think what they're awaiting, the feeling you get is they are awaiting the new miniatures range to really explode. And to be more than they were back in the days of 7th Ed and whatnot.
Yeah, it's the only way to do it, because if you brought out a brand new, sparkling Chaos Space Marines book and had nothing to release alongside it.
Which they didn't, They really wanted to get the Chaos book and the Space Marine book out like that, didn't they? Get it out there. Which is, very surprising as to the quality of them, because they're both very good codexes. Very good codexes, actually. There's some nasty, nasty stuff you can do with that Chaos Codex.
But I heard a very interesting little idea that was kicking around, that the work started on 8th edition literally a week after 7th came out.
I can well believe that. Because 7th wasn't really much of an addition, to be honest.
No, it wasn't.
It was basically an update for 6th. In real terms, it was 6.5. You know, I think it was a stopgap because I think they were really putting all of their energy into 8th and into the big new redesigns and everything.
Yeah.
Which is, you know,
it's understandable. But I think because of the amount of time that 8th took to make, because they went down to ground level and built back
totally.
up from
I mean, for the
scratch.
first time since the introduction of 3rd Ed. You know, it's so we've had so many additions since then that utilise the basic 3rd Ed dynamic. You know, although they tweaked and changed it, it's still the same stat lines, the same basic rules. They just flip them about a bit. You know, no, 8th Ed is a total redesign and a brilliant one. I mean, I really, really, really like 8th Ed. I think it's the best that 40k has been. I really, really do, and I think the potential for it to evolve further is immense.
Staying within the 40k merchandising universe, you have Kill Team, don't you?
I
have Kill Team.
I love Kill Team. I love it very much.
Kill Team's awesome.
It's mini 40k. It's lots of fun with a
is.
slight more role-playing element thrown in for good measure.
And that's one of the things I really like about it. Because the one game of Kill Team that I've had something that took me right back to my youth.
What was that?
A Games Master.
Yeah, so, you know, and having a Games Master for Kill Team is loads of fun because they can throw in, like, you know, little things that maybe the players wouldn't expect. They can mess about with, like, environmental factors and whatnot. It's lots of fun. And what I found with Kill Team is a lot of the units have... They're basically act as force multipliers. So, like, Thousand Suns, for example, which I play in Kill Team, are really good in 40k. They're actually really, really good. But in 40k they're fantastic. But in Kill Team they're awesome. In Kill Team they're absolutely brilliant. Their use and their worth is multiplied to the power of n because they have everything you want in Kill Team. They've got invulnerable saves. They've got immunity to certain kinds of weapons. They can put out lots of firepower. Each individual miniature is worth its weight, basically. The
joy that I took on a Kill Team was the really strong narrative element to the scenarios. And it's one of those things I've always felt, if there's no narrative point to the game, I kind of lose interest a little bit. I need there to be a bit more going on than just being rules heavy number crunching.
Likewise, there needs to be something behind it.
And in this game, there was it was my Genestealer cult versus a Skitarii band.
Interesting.
Just, the stuff out of the box, you know. And in the scenery, there was a broken down Armiger. And about turn 2 or turn 3, the Armiger suddenly came to life and started shooting at everybody.
Oh, wow.
So both teams for the next 2 turns were trying to kill that thing,
brilliant.
Stop it from shooting away. Because it wrecked both bands, absolutely did massive amounts of damage.
That's brilliant.
But it was a really cool moment of just, all of a sudden you hear a whining sound.
That's fantastic.
Why do we hear a whining sound?
That's ace. That's why I like Kill Team myself. Beyond the fact that it's very easy to pick up and play, which it is, you know, you don't need a great deal to actually play a game of Kill Team, really.
No, you don't.
So,
the scenery
sorry, Adam, you've just gone really low. Yeah.
Is that better?
That's a bit better. Yes, I don't know what happened there. You just went like, I couldn't quite hear you.
I think, for some reason, my... is automatically trying to compensate for background noise.
Oh, right, that's what it is. Okie cokes.
Right, so I need to change that, but I can't do it whilst we're recording.
Oh, right, okay, no worries. No worries.
I shall just keep an eye on it.
But no, Kill Team is brilliant. And of course, we've got the new version now, Rogue Trader, which,
Yes.
God, I need that box set. I mean, just amazing. Absolutely amazing, and all those wonderful, wonderful miniatures. This is the first time I've thought that is a John Blanche illustration come to life.
Yeah, which conjures up a really interesting conversation, to be honest. I've seen a lot of... Not a lot, to be honest, actually. It's been very much in the minority. A lot of people talking about how it doesn't look like it fits in 40k.
I think it's fine, personally. In fact, you know what? I think it elevates the aesthetic of 40k.
That is my 40k right there.
Absolutely.
That's the one that I played back with Rogue Trader. You know, that is the 40k that I think of. That is the mid 80s, early 90s version that I inherited from my cousin. You know, I mean, everything about it is just
the
gorgeous,
character.
and I want to lick it.
Each of those miniatures on both sides, you know, both the Jellipox mutants and the agents of the Imperium side, they are so characterful. Each miniature's like a little diorama. They tell a story. And I love that. I absolutely love it. I mean, that's what I need to get interested in Imperial miniatures, certainly. That degree of character. Because that interests me. That actually fascinates me beyond like just ranks of Space Marines who all look the same or ranks of Astra Militaria who all look the same. I'm not interested in that at all. I actually want there to be a little bit of narrative in each miniature. And that's what you get. And not only that, I mean, well, if it doesn't look like 40k, well, then 40k needs to pull its bootstraps up a bit. Because this is what it should be. For me,
this is John Blanche's art given 3D and moved.
I mean, it's a personal thing. Obviously, it depends on what aesthetic you go for. But for me, this aesthetic is the one that makes 40k so distinct as a universe. That makes it more than just a product of its influences or just another, derivative science fiction universe. It lends it flavor. It lends it a degree of character that I think it sorely needs. It really, really needs to make it interesting. And I'm so glad it's going down that route, particularly with the Imperium, that it can be in danger at times of being overshadowed by more elaborate, more mythic forces like, say, Chaos or whatever, you know?
Yeah, which is a massive shame when you think about it, because the Imperium is where it all begins for 40k. You go back through the evolution of it and the creation of it. The Imperium of Man back in Rogue Trader was a really weird hodgepodge example of both influences and concepts. I mean, do you remember the Space Marines? You were used to be able to have half Eldar.
Yeah, in fact, the first Ultramarines, like Chief Librarian, was half Eldar, wasn't he?
He was indeed. Indeed.
They were not quite as xenophobic back then.
Well, no, because they were a totalitarian police force rather than a fascist government. So.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the Space Marines were not genetically enhanced Supermen back then either. They were just people.
They were space cops.
Yeah, they were just people in powered armour. It was a different thing entirely. There were no Primarchs. That concept had never come about at that point. It's really fascinating to go back and read, actually. Really fascinating.
It is. It really is. Let's not get into the evolution of Rogue Trader, because that is a conversation.
Yeah, but isn't it lovely that like the new Rogue Trader has gone back to that aesthetic, and it updated it as well. It's not just like nostalgic; it's actually updated it and made it something new and interesting. The same is true of the Jellipox mutants. It would have been so tempting to make them just another Chaos Force, and they're not. They're their own very unusual thing. They're allied to Chaos, certainly, because they're products of Chaos, but they're not entirely the same as, say, a Death Guard force or as a cult. They are something different.
Well, they are beings who owe their existence to Chaos rather than beings who've pledged their existence to Chaos.
Yeah, that is fascinating. That is really interesting. And also, I love the fact that environmentally they operate differently, you know? They're operating on ships in the warp.
Yeah, which makes me think, is there going to be like a Jellipox mutant force in 40k at some point?
I imagine it's likely. They've poured time and effort into sculpting these things, and I imagine they're going to use it as a testbed to see if they're popular enough. But I would imagine, yes. I imagine that if they do that, they'll either take the place of Chaos Cultists or they'll be part of a Chaos Cultist release.
Yes, I think you're probably right there. I think that's probably be where they'd end up. They'd end up as a chaos cultist alternative or a bolstering of that.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically like you know how AOS takes old armies and updates them and makes them slightly new and revamps them. The Jellipox mutants strike me as that phenomena applied to what chaos cults used to be.
Yeah.
So, I can see space for that. I can see, and of course, the fact they've done the Gene Stealer cult means that chaos cults are kind of a shoo-in.
Yes.
It's kind of inevitable at this point.
My beloved Gene Stealer cults.
Which are wonderful and coming. They're on their way. They will be relatively soon, from what I understand.
Yeah. And soon I will be able to have that amazing Wild West.
He was great.
Hybrid.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Love him.
Yeah, he's still not out.
Very dynamic miniature, that one. Very dynamic indeed. And those wonderful aberrants. Wow. They're fantastic. I mean, one of the things that I didn't like about one of the very few things, by the way, I didn't like about the re-release of the Gene Stealer cults back in 7th Ed was the aberrant miniatures didn't look aberrant enough. You know?
Yeah. The Cronenberg body horror hadn't gone full circle.
It hadn't gone quite there. These ones, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. It's the one whose face is splitting in half that gets me. It's like, oh yeah. So good.
And I love the fact that like their weapons are like lampposts and things.
Yeah, that's genius as far as I'm concerned.
It's brilliant. Well, it lends them place. Immediate place. Yeah. You know, you see where they are and where they're operating. I love that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the Gene Stealer cults in 40k. The new 40k in 8th Ed.
Yeah, same. I can't wait for it. Although, I've got a question for you. You know, in Rogue Trader, you've got the Jellipox mutants... You've got the Rogue Trader herself.
Yes.
You've also got something I don't think we've ever seen in 40k before. We've got
the dog. Yeah, the cyber dog.
The dog has robot legs. I've never known 40k to ever put robot legs on something that wasn't bipedal and humanoid.
I mean, I've seen cyber ravens before.
Mm-hmm, that's true. Yeah.
And there must be others. I'm sure there must be some other, like an Inquisitor who has some cyber familiar of some sort, like a crow or something.
But it conjures up a really interesting modelling idea.
Yeah.
That this dog has been harmed and thus needs a new robot leg, but they don't have any dog robot legs, so they just give it a human arm.
Human arm or something. Yeah, so it can.
Which then comes with the idea of imagine a dog with just human arms running at you. Which may be the most terrifying thing I've ever thought of.
Yeah, there's just so much wrong with that.
Just grasping at you with its human arms.
So much wrong. But yeah.
And just the beautiful moment. Oh no, the devil has come to collect.
He's awesome. Yeah, he's a lovely miniature. Lovely miniature.
It is, really is. But there's so much going on in Rogue Trader that I'm really interested to find out about. All the miniatures all seem to be named and have a little bit of history to them.
They've all got background.
I want to know about their histories.
They've all got background, which is really fascinating. And I think it's the first time in ages that there has been an actual Rogue Trader unit that you can use in 40k. That's great. That's absolutely brilliant, because the Rogue Traders obviously are mainstays. They're actually linchpins in the background. They're parts of what make the Imperium function. And also what I love about the Rogue Traders is they're basically pirates, aren't they? I mean, I know they're called traders and whatnot, but what I love about them is they flirt with Imperial law because they know that the Imperium needs them.
Mm-hmm. They are government-sponsored
That's
pirates.
right. They're basically the East India Trading Corporation, aren't they?
That's exactly who
they
are.
They can do whatever they like. So all the crap about heresy and they don't give a shit about that. They don't give two shits about that. I can imagine some rogue traders having real insouciance, like being really flirtatious and cheeky and sarcastic with the likes of Inquisitors or whatever, because they know they have special dispensation. They know they can get away with it.
It often depends on the rogue trader family.
Yes.
The extended rogue trader family, because the family often attracts like for like. So you'll get like the von Starnads, something like that, and they are quite a devout and puritanical family. So on their ships, it is the litanies of the Imperium throughout the day. You know, no humans, no aberrants. They very much live within the letter of Imperial law. But then you get all right the way through down to the beautifully named Starkiller family. And they are just super rogues. There's no other word for them. And there's got all the ones in between. I remember a short story it must have been in one of the Infernos from the late 90s. And it was just two members of two families just constantly coming to blows over trying to work out which direction to fly a ship in.
Brilliant.
Because they were both reading the outside influences in completely different ways.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. They are very interesting characters, and you can go down so many routes with them because there's so many archetypes in film, and in there's the obvious is like the Han Solo type and the Captain Jack Sparrow type.
But where's the Gellerfield?
Yeah. You can just go wild with them, and I hope they get like a full force.
I think a full force might be pushing it just purely because of what a rogue trader is. However, I would love to see in I don't know what you'd call it, an expanded Imperium
sort of like an
codex,
Imperial Agents Codex, maybe.
Yeah, that would be a good way of doing it. So you could have like the assassins, rogue traders,
maybe some of the more out there Inquisitor Ordos, because there's lots of Ordos out there. There's not just like there's not just like the Ordo Hereticus, the Ordo Xenos, and the other one, the Ordo Malleus. There's actually loads of different Ordos out there, and lots of Ordos that operate independently that are sort of like semi-heretical. Which is really cool. And
they're my favourite.
I like them too because you get the more interesting Inquisitors in them. The ones that are technically would probably be arrested if they ever came upon the bigger Ordos, but which operate their own agendas in order to save the Imperium or do whatever it is in their mad minds they think they need to do. I love that. I absolutely love that. More of that, please.
My favourite versions of the Inquisitor are always the ones where they just go around kidnapping various small Xenos and either press ganging them into the Force or sticking them in a cage. There's just something about them that I find absolutely, I don't know, I find it really funny, but on the other hand I also find it deeply disturbing.
Deeply distressing, yeah. And the fact that they operate, the ones that are actually sanctioned by the Imperium, they can do whatever the hell they like. They are Matthew Hopkins, aren't they? They can they can extort, they can kidnap, they can torture, they can mutilate, they have license to just like on a whim genocide, bomb that planet, destroy everything.
Well, it's the expanded version of like the Chicago mobsters during Prohibition, isn't it? It's everyone has to look the other way because it's not worth the trouble in looking too closely.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you wouldn't if you were around an Inquisitor, you would just not even look at them. You would just bow your head, wouldn't you, and grovel and hope that they don't take offence to you. Because if they did, you'd be done.
That's why Inquisitors will always be one of my favourite things in the entirety of 40k.
I like the Inquisitors a lot, actually. And I find that in the fiction, inquisitorial characters tend to be really interesting.
Yes, they
There's
are.
one in the Ahriman series, in John French's Ahriman series, and she sort of comes to blows with Ahriman at some point, and it's really weird. She becomes he has this weird affection for her because she tries to tackle him psychically, and it's almost like, oh, you ridiculous child, you absurd child. But after that, she almost becomes like a spectre in his head. It's almost like he takes her into himself and she becomes an aspect of him that's always reminding him of what he's doing wrong, of how he's failed in the past. And he has conversations with her, this spectre in his mind. It's really interesting. It's really fascinating. And she's not the sort of hyper-zealous Inquisitor. She's a bit more highly strung. She's a bit more, in a bizarre way, kind of liberated. It's really kind of odd. I like that portrayal of the Inquisitors.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I always think the thing about the Inquisitors that fascinates me, and it begins with the Jacques Draco books. Of course,
Draco, yeah.
Because, those books, I mean, they don't quite fit with 40k
Not anymore, no. There's some concepts in them that don't really work.
No. Well, one of the main characters is a squat.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, he associates with Eldar.
He does.
Just probably wouldn't fly anymore.
But he does it in a very roundabout manner.
I mean, there is kind of an inversion of that relationship, funnily enough, in one of the Chaos books. In Aaron Dembski-Bowden's Black Legion, there's a Thousand Sun sorcerer, Iskander Kane, who has as his ward a Dark Elder.
Right.
One of his like familiars, if you like, is a Dark Elder Scourge.
That's cool.
It's really cool. And what's more, it is not the case that she's his prisoner or anything like that.
No.
And it's not the case that he tolerates her under sufferance. They actually do respect one another massively. And he's got this odd affection towards her, this very peculiar affection towards her. It's very unusual. Like it a lot.
I'll have to grab that one. Speaking of fiction, though, a really interesting bit of news that popped up during our absence is one that got me very excited, is the 1-2 punch of The Return of Inferno.
Yeah, wow.
And Inferno is out in reprint.
Yes, you can get all the old ones. And
it's not all of them yet.
But it will be.
Yes, and oh, good grief, am I tempted to do
Me too.
that.
That's a pure nostalgia trip. I mean, that's where the seeds of the Black Library came from.
It is.
Back then, the fiction wasn't as tight. It's not. No. On a technical level, it's not great. But for many of us, it was like the first time we'd read stories of that length in 40k or in whatever. So there's a lot of fun to be had. There's a lot of fun to be had. I mean, there's like the classic stories like Wrath of Khan, for example, which doesn't really work anymore.
Which is on my YouTube.
Yeah, it doesn't work anymore, like in the present day.
No.
Because Khan's way too lucid in it. He's way too lucid. But it's still a lot of fun to read. It's a lot of fun. You've also got like the early Malice Darkblade stuff and whatnot in those.
You do.
Those books.
There was Gotrek and Felix in there. There was Grunson's Marauders. Lost Chances and Gaunt's Ghosts. They got their stars there.
These are characters that became so popular in the fiction. They actually became miniatures later on. Yeah, Malice is actually a character in the old Dark Elder books now. Dark Elf books,
Good old Malice Darkblade.
Malice Darkblade, the basically the Eternal Champion equivalent in Warhammer. He's like Tempest Thales or what, isn't he? He's like,
Yes.
one of these like slightly edgelord characters. Who's just like grim dark and can kill anyone, and he's like hyper skilled but has this element of tragedy woven into him.
See, now you've got me wanting to hear Malice Darkblade doing quotes from Rorschach from Watchmen.
Yeah.
They will look up and say, "Save us," and I'll look down and I'll stab him in the face with my magic demon sword.
That's basically
and I'll say no.
That is basically it. I mean, he was written in such an edgelordy way.
Oh, he is super edgelord. He predates the term, but he
really is. I remember there's one of the comics where he kills his own father. And the demon, the demon in his blade, or the one that's bound into his flesh, says something like, "I'm a demon and you scare me sometimes." And it's like, oh, fuck off. It's like, this is really edgelordy. It works very well when you're a teenager. It doesn't work so well when you're an adult,
No, it's the difference between, going back and watching something like The Crow and something like Last Man Standing, it's like, I quite like The Crow still, but dear, this is...
You have to appreciate it of its time. You really do have to look at it in that context, because if you don't, then it's like, this, doesn't quite work as well.
It's all right, George. It can't rain all the time.
And I know that's probably going to be blasphemy to some of the demographics listening to this podcast, but don't get me wrong, I like The Crow fine. I really appreciate it for what it was at the time. I mean, it's a really good sort of dark superhero film of the era.
Mm-hmm. And it's got some absolutely beautiful scenery and shots, but it's also got him working out his anguish by playing the guitar on the roof in the rain.
It also has that, yes. It also has a lot of that, and this kind of heavy-handed morality that's a little bit,
But on the other hand, it also has Top Dollar, who is fantastic.
Yes, it has Top Dollar, who I absolutely adore, yeah. Brilliant villain, because he's just a bastard. That's what I like. He's just a bastard. There's nothing else to him. He is just a pure and unadulterated bastard who looks fantastic.
Yeah, he does. He really does.
Wow, he looks awesome.
I think that was my ambition in life, was I wanted to grow up to look like him.
Top Dollar, yeah.
Yeah.
Anywho,
moving on. Shall we talk a little bit about some Age of Sigmar
yeah,
stuff?
why not? I mean, what have we had going on in AOS beyond all the fallout from the Necroquake and whatnot? Beasts of Chaos.
Yes. See, this is the main thing I wanted to talk about today.
You know what really surprised me about that release? I had no doubt they were going to do it, but what really surprised me about it is, despite having very few new miniatures, I mean, the only new miniatures for it are the Eternal Spell miniatures and the Herdstone. They've poured so much effort into that book.
They really have. They have gone back years, and they have taken influences. Well, to be honest with you, they've taken influences right the way back from Warhammer 3.
Yeah, and even further than that, I think they've, with the new Beasts of Chaos book, they've gone back to like the old mythological roots of the Beastmen. You know how they're kind of like the Dark Fae army in many respects. They've got a sort of Celtic and Nordic element to them. They've gone right back to that. So now, just like, you know how they made the Skaven really mythological, they're not just like things that live underground, but they're like these elemental entities that are gnawing away at the bedrock of reality. They've done exactly the same with the Beast of Chaos. So they've expanded them. They're not just like carnivorous entities that exist in the woods that might take you and eat you. They're actually elemental forces now, and they represent absolute and total misrule. So they are philosophically and ideologically against civilization, against the notion of order.
They've become the sons of the Satyr.
Yeah.
You know, they are very much the antithesis of civilization. The creatures that look upon the Hearthstone, the Hearthfire, and the family unit as see it as blasphemy against the natural world.
The natural way, yeah. They're very Darwinian, aren't they? They're very sort of like massively Darwinian. And what I love about them is they've used that dynamic to lend them a very different relationship to Chaos than, say, the mortal followers of Chaos, or even the demons, both of whom they look down on. Although there are beastmen that dedicate themselves to the Chaos powers, or that incidentally garner the attention of the Chaos powers through what they do, they are not devout. They're not devout at all. They actually regard themselves as the manifestation of Chaos.
Well, there's a bit in the book where they're talking about how a Brayherd gets large enough to start to look down upon demons, like greater demons, as being dabblers in chaotic behavior.
They're slaves. That's what they don't like about the demons. They regard them as weak because they have no choice.
Yeah.
They have no autonomy. Everything they do is at the lash of the Chaos powers. Everything they do. Whereas the Beastmen have a degree of autonomy. So they do what they do, and it happens to please the Chaos powers. It just happens to be that the way they want to act and what they regard as sacred and right coincides with the powers of Chaos. And of course they are the true children of Chaos, of course, because they were created when the polar gates were destroyed in the old world. They are actually they're kind of what the Chaos powers would see as the main life form, certainly from their own perspective. That's what they think.
Which conjures up an interesting idea that is hinted at in the Battle Tome, which is a weird cylindrical relationship between the Chaos gods and the Beastmen. So the Chaos gods need the Beastmen to exist, as much as they don't go out and worship a singular deity. Their actions feed the Chaos gods in different ways. So, you know, the basic form of the attacks and going out and raiding, that feeds Khorne. The magic for Tzeentch, and so on and so forth.
The rapine quality feeds Slaanesh, because of course they are creatures that are slaves to their instincts and to their desires.
Yes, very much so. And what makes that really interesting is that the Chaos gods need them to exist in order to keep being sustained in ways that they wouldn't be otherwise. But then, on the other hand, the Brayherds don't really need the Chaos gods.
No, they don't. They really, really don't. That's the point, isn't it? That's the difference between them and, say, like the disciples of Tzeentch, say, or the Blades of Khorne.
This is where it gets really interesting,
the mortal followers dedicate themselves to the Chaos powers and rely upon the blessings of the Chaos powers for their strength and for their ability to operate, whereas the Beastmen really don't.
Because the Beastmen are Chaos incarnate.
That's right.
This is where it gets fascinating to me, and this is where I got really excited when I was reading through the book. Unfortunately, I started reading the book after I got home from work one night, and I was there at 2 o'clock in the morning, giddy, with no one to talk to about. So, what I found fascinating is that every other form of Chaos army or Chaos cult or anything like that, they are locked to the power that they serve, which puts in place a small medium of order into their lives. Whilst the Brayherds have none of that. They are incarnate chaos. They do whatever they want, however they want, and they do it in the hardest and strongest manner that they can do it.
Pure anarchy.
That they can physically do it. Yeah, they are anarchy given, in some cases, 2 legs, in some cases 4. And that fascinates me because that comes through in the rule set as well, that they are a giant screaming horde of unpredictability.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love it, and I want to do a Beastman army.
Me too.
I
never have wanted to before.
I can't.
I've never wanted to before. I mean, I've always sort of liked them, but they've always been the least of the Chaos forces for me in the fantasy setting. I've never been that interested in them, apart from the Zarngor, who I absolutely love.
Same.
But now, no, they are interesting now. They are really interesting because they've got ideology, they've got dynamic, they've got philosophy that sets them apart from all of the other Chaos forces.
Yeah, I mean, there's ideas that are brought up in here which I would love to explore in greater detail, where the Beastmen come from now. Yeah. Because they're not like the elves where their souls have been picked out of the old world and then reborn into the new. These are desecrated creatures that have been reborn anew. There is no...
they're unnatural, aren't they? They are...
Well, yeah, there's no metaphysical connection to the old world as such. Things have happened to purposefully create new Beastmen, and there's a really weird bit. I'm trying to find it now, but I can't. But in the book, there's a sequence where they talk about the father of dragon ogres.
Yes, Ankalaga. Oh no, what's his name? Something the Black. It's like Caligan the Black or something like that.
But did you recognise the name at all?
I can't remember what it was.
Right. He was a dragon ogre hero in either 3rd or 4th edition Fantasy Battle. So he has survived, come into the mortal realms. He's now the size of a mountain and sleeps all the time. But he has all of the creatures of chaos, the children of chaos, have been birthed from him.
So the things like the chimeras and the beasts, the real monsters, the Jabba Slyths and whatnot.
Yeah, and from those have been where the Beastmen have been reborn from.
Right, so he's essentially like Typhon in Greek mythology, like the father of monsters.
Yes. And now, in no way does the book come out and say that, but you draw enough of the conclusions together, and that's where it comes from. And the fact that he's there, I mean, it's just a throwaway line in one of the bits, but it was one of those moments of, wait a second, let's just have a look at this in greater detail. And the further through the book you go, the more of that is hinted at. And it gives them this really mythological edge that the Age of Sigmar mentality has been from day one, and it works perfectly because their history is one of, it's almost Greek.
It's very classical. It's very classical, isn't it? That's what I really love about the book. It draws on all of this stuff. Like you get there's elements of like ancient Greek mythology. There's a bit of Nordic. There's a bit of Celtic. There's a lot of fairy tale. There's a lot of like dark, grim fairy tale in it. The things in the woods, the monsters in the woods, the fey things, the changelings, the things that will come out of the woods and wreak bloody havoc upon you. I love that. I love that.
What it put me in mind of a lot of was the Proto-Prussian mythologies, the I'm trying to remember what the name for the time period is, and it's completely passing me by. Before Germany and Russia existed, you had those just hundreds and hundreds of tiny countries. And
all bounded by
deep
forests and deep,
yes,
dark places.
very much so.
Yeah.
And a lot of what the Beastmen background and influences seem to be is that really early European mythology, but it's been put through almost like a Greek ringer in order to get the tragedy side of it pushed out there a little bit.
What it reminded me of more than anything
it goes
is
right back through to the Norken.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that kept coming to my mind while I was reading the book is the stories of Legevaudan. The great forest in I think it's in southern France, which is basically it didn't give birth to werewolf myths, but it is like where they crystallized and where they became what they are. It's that notion of the deep dark woods and something very, very animalistic and beyond reason lingering in there, something that hates humanity, something that wants to devour humanity. That's where the Beastmen come from. It's a very, very ancient archetype. And I love it. I absolutely love that you've got an expression of that now in AOS, a proper one. And it works beautifully. And, you know, you have all of what I also loved about the book is you have all of these subdivisions. So it's not just a Beastman horde or a Beastman herd or whatever. You've got the different phrase, which are all... They're herds that by their actions draw the attentions of particular chaos powers. So you've got Slake phrase for Slaanesh, you've got Twist phrase for Tzeentch, and so on and so forth. And then it's further subdivided. So you have these three archetypes in the book. I can't quite remember what they're called. There's the All Herd, which is the big one. The All Herd, which basically, as it says, is all of the aspects of the Beasts of Chaos sort of all together. It's the holistic army, if you like. Then you've got the I think they're called the Dark Stalkers. Dark Walkers, that's right. The ones who are more like the Fae or fairy tale archetype. The ones who wander the dark of the woods and who know the secret ways through not only through the woods but also through realities. Just so cool. So cool.
See, the third one's the one that gets me the most. The Gave Spawn.
Yeah, the Gave Spawn. And the reason I liked it is because it's a way of bringing back an old character from the older days of the Beastmen. Morgher, who is one of my favourites from back in the day. I always loved Morgher. Always absolutely loved him because he's the very embodiment of what the Beastmen are about. He is basically untrammeled chaos in mortal flesh. So back in the day, he was a special character who could mutate things by being near him. And he also used to mutate the land around him as well. He is like rampant chaos. He's an icon of chaos made manifest. But he's become like not a god, but almost like a saint or a prophet.
Sorry. He's become a exalted, hasn't he? That's in the same way that Archaon's become the focal point of all chaos. He's become a focal point of local chaos.
Absolutely. And now he's like worshipped by certain herds of beastmen, and they follow his example. They regard like mutation and corruption and twisting flesh and desolation as though it's holy. And that's so cool. It's so cool. I love that. So you've got all of these different flavours now, all of these different flavours of Beastman armor you can put together, all of which operate differently, all of which look different and feel different. I love the book. The book is a joy to read.
It is. I've gone through it maybe 6 or 7 times at this point, even without having any of the miniatures or the army to play. Just reading it and seeing where it takes the reader through the mortal realms has been an absolute joy. Yeah. This thing has knocked it out of the park. And I was sitting thinking that the Tzeentch book was going to be as good as it gets. I was wrong.
I mean, the Disciples of Tzeentch book is awesome. Don't you? It's absolutely brilliant.
It is. It really is.
There are some better ones out there now, definitely. I mean, this is one of them. The Beasts of Chaos book is fantastic, and I hope it bodes well for the Slaves to Darkness book, which apparently we're getting in 2019.
Yeah.
I hope it bodes very well for that, because that will be the opposite of this book in many respects, because this will be the mortal followers of Chaos.
Yes.
which I imagine will be like, it will be your polyglot army. It's where you can draw on all of the elements from the Disciples of Tzeentch, from the Blades of Khorne, the Maggotkin of Nurgle, and whatever the Slaanesh one will be in the interim, because that's coming as well, by the way.
Yes, it is. Can't wait for that.
Yeah, and also I imagine it'll be the return of Archaon. So we'll get, you know how like we've been.
Does it have to
yeah,
be?
afraid so. I mean, they've been focusing on Nagash as the principal villain for quite a while now, and we know what Nagash has been doing now.
Yeah,
so
I know, but Nagash is interesting.
I love Nagash. I do love Nagash. But yeah,
I'm sorry. I don't know what it is about Archaon. I can't get invested in
he's
him.
not. He's more of an archetype, isn't he? He is like he is the throwaway big bad character.
Who would have thought that the giant towering zombie skeleton would have more personality?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. I mean, because that's what he is. He's the Dark Lord. He's the Sauron.
He is, yeah.
That's what he is. That's the purpose he serves in the game and in the background. But yeah, I mean, because we need to know what he's been doing though, because he's been away from the background for a long time. A long time, and there's lots has happened since then. So what's he been doing in response to Nagash, for example, and to the Necroquake and all of that stuff?
Hiding from that as
Possibly. I mean,
he's just been hiding because Nagash is just too good.
I don't know if there is a miniature that could actually go toe to toe with Nagash. Archaon could probably be it. He's an absolute beast.
He is, and that miniature is stunning.
Yeah.
I'll admit that. It is an absolutely stunning. It's literally just down to the fact that Archaon has never, in my mind, had a personality.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean,
if he doesn't have a personality, I find it hard to find a reason to get behind the idea of the character.
I totally agree. I mean, the closest I've come to being interested in Archaon is his very early background. You know, when he was actually a priest of Sigmar and read some prophecy that drove him mad. And then he went around killing his entire family and burning his temple to the ground. Anakin Skywalker.
Has he been killing younglings?
Probably. That's interesting. I like that. I like the early Archaon where maybe he's still got a bit of doubt and where maybe he's like not quite with it and he's still struggling to establish himself. That's really fascinating. New Archaon really is just a vessel for the Chaos Powers and their intentions. I mean, there really is not much else to him. He's not like, say, Abaddon, who's very much his equivalent in 40k. Abaddon does have personality and he has charisma and he has like complexities going on, especially since Aaron Dembski-Bowden's books about him. Archaon not so much. Archaon can be a bit dull.
But I suppose he has to be, doesn't he, in order to fill the archetype that needed to be there. It's one of those things where I don't think there's a right answer to this one, but it's just my personal opinion that I find him a little bit
absolutely.
boring.
I mean,
But you put him against some of the other characters, especially some of the other characters who are kicking around in AOS. You know, Musgullet Stinkmullet is one of the greatest things who's ever existed ever. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if you compare him to his nearest equivalent, which is Nagash, has loads of personality. Nagash is really interesting. He's really interesting.
Nagash is at the same time absolutely terrifying and absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I like Nagash a lot. Actually, I've got a lot of time for Nagash.
Oh, same. Nagash has got so much dry humour to it.
Well, it would be dry, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, true. Yeah, it's not going to be sticky. But the amount of snark that Nagash has got just makes me really happy.
I suppose after a while, after the first 10 millennia being undead, you kind of develop a very wry sense of humour. You just don't care anymore, do you?
Well, it's the same with Ark and the Black. Ark and the Black's got a really great sense of humour that's lodged into the character.
Absolutely. And all the vampire lords have got great personalities.
Yeah, Manfred, of course, he's fantastic.
Neferata, like her.
Neferata. What's the new Mortar called? The Olympius?
I can't remember his name.
No, not the Craven King.
The other one,
the Queen of Thorns.
The Ghost. I don't know. I can't remember her name, but she's awesome. Love her.
Begins with an O. I can't remember, but there's a little bit in there about how she goes around the world, and that's pretty good. She's got a great personality, one that's just tormented horror.
I call her the Dark Souls Mortar because she looks like a creature from Dark Souls. She just looks like someone in the design team has been playing Dark Souls and thought, oh, I'm going to introduce a bit of that into AOS.
You don't say.
I mean, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Have you not seen the Night Vault team that's coming out for the Undead?
I bloody have, and again, yes, Dark Souls down to the wire, yeah.
One's carrying their own head, you know.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, one of those armies, I would love to collect one, but I cannot. I haven't got the time.
No, I'm having to draw a close on my undead army at the moment just so I can do other stuff.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise I'd just be there for years at this point.
I know, because the stuff that we know is coming, and I know I'll collect it. So I've got to make space now. I've got to make some space in my schedule for it. The big one is obviously the return of Slaanesh, which we talk about a lot on this podcast.
Yes, we have. But I think it's worth.
It's worth revisiting.
I'm just going to put this ringer back in my bell. It seems to have lost something. Just put that over there. Yeah. So you were saying that Slaanesh is coming back? Really? I didn't think the Games Workshop were ever going to bring Slaanesh back.
No, I know. Slaanesh is being squatted, apparently.
Sorry, I put far too much emotion into that. Mm-hmm. I didn't think Slaanesh was ever coming back. I thought they'd been squatted by you. Sorry, I'm being super snappy.
Yeah, me too. To be honest, me too. Because as we've said a million times on this podcast, this whole thing about Slaanesh being squatted is totally contrived. It's a really good example of how conspiracy theories get started and whatnot. Because it has become almost canon on the internet. In the last decade or so, it's become more or less canon that Games Workshop are squatting Slaanesh because of this, because of that, and it's bull.
Well, this ties into a very interesting thought process. Have Games Workshop noticed this, realised that this is what people are saying, and have purposefully removed Slaanesh from everything in order to keep that going, so when the return happens, it's bigger and better.
I think that may be the case, because you know what? Slaanesh has never actually gone away. They removed it mythologically to lend it this interesting sort of narrative flair, to explain its absence, essentially, to explain the absence of new miniatures and whatnot. Now we have absolute confirmation that not only is there an entire new Slaanesh range coming out, but that it is the most Slaanesh range you have ever seen in your life. Classically Slaanesh. The cant, the rhetoric has always been, Slaanesh is too sort of adult, its aspects are too ribald or too overt for young fans and blah, 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 blah. To which my response has been, more overt than Nurgle? Where you've got these very graphic descriptions of disease and mutilation and whatnot. Well, that's less disturbing than, whatever, that, or Khorne, where it's all slaughter, it's all violence.
Well, this is the thing. This is a massive. It's a massive mirror up against society. Yes,
absolutely.
Here. And I don't think it's meant to be, but
it is.
It
can't help but be.
Where Khorne, whose entire purpose of being is bloody-handed murder, the more visceral and the more violent, the better, and that's fine.
That's okay.
The moment sexuality is brought into it.
No.
The sky is falling. The sky is falling.
No, it's not even sexuality, really, with the miniatures. It's just suggestions of anatomy. That's it. Yeah. That's all it is. And it seems to have been totally contrived. There doesn't seem to be any verifiable statement or evidence that this was happening or that this. No. There doesn't seem to be anything. Everything seems to be hyperbole and exaggeration. And not to get too snarky about it, but I do feel that there are certain outlets on the internet out there that whenever they had a slow news day, whenever they didn't have anything to print, they would just print a Slaanesh is being squatted story.
Mm-hmm. Oh, look, my ring just fell out my bell again. Yeah. Hang on, I don't want to lose that.
It's weird, isn't it? I mean, and what I really like now is that now that it's been demonstrated that is total garbage, certainly from the company's perspective, they've done a volte-face. So everything now, it's almost like they're trying to ignore the fact that they spent the last 6 years or so pushing this narrative. being the principal platform.
Daily Mail level of turning around on a dime. It's
like, come on. And of course, what we're talking about, what we're referencing, is the leaked Fiend of Slaanesh, which is one of the most brilliant miniatures. It's one of the most fantastic Slaanesh miniatures that's ever been released by Games Workshop. It's as overt as you like. I mean, it's way beyond like the older miniatures, which are a bit more overt than the newer ones. It's all of the essential aspects that I love about Slaanesh. It's slightly perverse, but suggestively so.
Yeah. This thing looks like it walked right out of the old Realm of Chaos books to me. Like the artwork of Ian Miller and people like that. It's not as 80s as those bits of artwork would be. It's more
elegant, isn't it? It's more elegant than that. But it has that things like, beyond like the twisted, perverted form of the Fiend itself, which is suggestive in and of itself, the way it's got like two inverted torsos, and one of them, the tail, basically is like it's an emulated phallus, essentially. Beyond that, the thing has like BDSM leather straps and things all over it, and it's also hermaphroditic, which was an element of Slaanesh which was kind of squatted at one point. That actually did go away at one point. No, this is overtly hermaphroditic, which I love. Absolute. That's something I've always wanted to come back in the Slaanesh miniatures range. So brilliant. I'm very pleased. It is a beautiful miniature, and if that's an example of the aesthetic that they're going to feed into, say, the Demonettes and into the Keeper of Secrets, which again we know is coming, into the up and coming Emperor's Children range, which again we know is coming, wonderful. What it makes me wonder is, what are they going to do in AOS? What is, you know how you've got like the Maggotkin for Nurgle, you've got the Disciples of Tzeentch. What are they going to do for the tome, the battle tome? What are we going to get? What are my guess is, just as the Nurgle battle tome is closer to the Blades of Khorne and dynamically, I think that the Slaanesh book, whatever it will be closer dynamically to the Disciples of Tzeentch. I think
that's exactly it.
They'll be operating in civilization, just like the Disciples of Tzeentch do. So they're not out there in the wilds. They're not barbarians. They're not out there in the wastes. They are actually civilized men and women and everything in between. Who have grown bored. You know, they are nobles, and they are academics, and they're artists, and they're inspired people. They may even, if they're very clever, they may even be able to introduce Slaanesh tainted elves into this.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad shout at all. What I'm looking forward to is, I'm hoping that something like City of Secrets gets released to go with it. C.L. Werner has proved himself time and time again to be probably the finest writer working in AOS at the moment. The stuff that he's been doing, if you haven't read Overlords of the Iron Dragon, I recommend reading Overlords of the Iron Dragon, because, oh my word, is that a wonderful bit of pulp. But I mean, something along the level of City of Secrets coming out for Slaanesh would be something majestic.
It's more difficult to write. It is more difficult to write because you.
But that's why I want it to be along the lines of City of Secrets, because a lot of, I mean, like the Fireslayer book, the Ideneth book, not Ideneth. But anyhow, when a book comes out for the army that's just had a battle tome released, it's very easy to go down the route of showing off who they are and what they can do.
Absolutely.
What City of Secrets did, and it did it wonderfully, did that by showing the world in which this was happening in, and the everlasting effects of the cult of Tzeentch. And that's where I think that kind of mentality would be brilliant. And it ties into what you're saying there, that the Slaanesh release would mirror Tzeentch's in quite a lot of ways. And in order to show what Slaanesh is, the real fear behind Slaanesh, and what it can do to people, is show the corrupting influence that it has on a civilization.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the on an individual level as well, you're going to need to have like characters who start off relatively innocently. Like maybe they join like an artists guild or something like that, which actually turns out to be underneath a cult, and it just slowly degrades over time. Becomes more extreme, until
I'm reminded of, and I can't remember the name of the character, but there's a sequence in the Conrad series of books where a Magister takes Conrad under his wing and shows him places to go, people to talk to, until eventually he gets invited to a party at the Magister's house. Once he arrives at the house, it becomes apparent very, very quickly that this is not a party. This is a cultish worship night. And they've actually kidnapped a Khorne acolyte. And the highlight of the evening is going to be sacrificing the Khorne acolyte.
Interesting.
And but the stuff that happens to that Khorne acolyte between goes on for quite some time.
I can imagine. I mean,
but within the Magister's house during this event, this party, the people there have actually taken on a physical change, where they have gone down their bodies have become more hermaphroditic.
Yep.
And it's fascinating, and that's the stuff I want to see.
I mean, I say it's more difficult to write, but you know what? I've always been surprised by how overt they've been with the Slaanesh stuff, say in the Horus Heresy books, you know? If you read Fulgrim or The Reflection Cracked or whatever, or any of the later stuff, it's really overt. It goes like Clive Barkerian at certain points. So, yeah, it could be really fun. I mean, I would love them to get really brave with it, personally. They won't do it, but I would love them to get really brave with any novel that comes out and maybe slap a caution thing on it and just say, no, this is full on like Cronenbergian horror with, this has got disturbing elements, it's got erotic elements, it's got, this is what we want for Slaanesh. I would love that.
There's a way you could do that though. Right, you do it and you just don't put it into the shops. You make it a Black Library online release only. And they've got plenty of online exclusives.
I would I would eat that up. I think that'd be brilliant.
And that that way at one point you're getting something out there that's going to be a bit more risque and dangerous. However, you're also not putting it into a place where it couldn't be accidentally
Absolutely,
bought.
I think that's a brilliant idea. And I think it would open up an entire new dimension for this kind of hobby, which is where Slaanesh treads the boundaries. Slaanesh is in many respects the chaos god that can do it, that can broach into those way more adult arenas, which I like. I think that's wonderful. But this miniature, this fiend, looks like they're going there. It does look like they're going there with it. Which is it's I love it. I love the fact that they're doing it. What that says to me is, they've been looking at the hysteria. They've been looking at the fairly nonsense claims that have been made. Like, all right, fine. We'll just do exactly the opposite then. We'll do exactly what you say we're not going to do. So there you are. It makes me very excited for the Keeper of Secrets, which a lot of rumour mongers have said has been completed for ages. It makes me very excited for Fulgrim.
Yeah, I was actually going to try and make some little joke about the cup being full, grim though it might be. But I mean, we know Fulgrim's been done. We know Fulgrim's ready to go.
It's just waiting for, by all accounts, it is just waiting now for a slot. But there are lots.
The slot's apparently in place. So it's all going to be happening beginning of next year.
So we've got the Emperor's Children Codex coming. And I imagine with that, on top of all the Slaanesh demons and Fulgrim, there's going to be stuff like the equivalents of Slaaneshi Terminators, there's going to be the equivalents of Slaaneshi Cultists, whatever they are going to be. They're going to have new Noise Marines, I would expect.
I hope so.
Well, let's face it, there's never been a good Noise Marine set.
No,
they've always been, you had 3 metal ones released in Second Ed.
I think they actually predate.
Do they predate Second Ed? Yeah.
I think
you
they
had
might.
3, a total of 3, so not even a complete unit. And then the last Noise Marine release was way back in the days of 3.5, and even then they weren't a proper set; they were a conversion set that you had to apply to like the plastic Chaos Space Marine set. So they weren't overtly Slaaneshi at all.
No,
they're a bit crap, to be honest.
I'm sure there's another release. Hang on
Noise Marines, nope.
I could swear there was a. Hang on,
there's a grand total. There's a grand total of 3 waves. There was the original Noise Marines, which are like the hair rock, Stad rock ones with the guitars.
Yeah, they're from 1991.
Yep. There were the Second Ed ones, which went in a slightly different direction. They're all really weird, and they've got skull faces and whatnot. They're very much based on Adrian Smith artwork. And then you had the 3.5 ones, which were not even a release.
Yeah, that's
right.
It's because I got mixed up between the ones the pre-second and then the actual
second ed ones. But that is it. That's all we've had for Noise Marines. So basically, the number of Noise Marine conversions out there is huge. I mean, unless you look at the Forge World releases, we did have the Cacophony, which were like they were the antecedents of the Noise Marines.
Yeah.
My guess is that any new Noise Marine release will be based on them.
I think you're probably right there.
I think it will look like them, which is fine, because they're good.
I've forgotten about the guitars.
The guitars, yeah. They won't look like guitars.
No, they won't. But these original Rogue Trader ones are fantastic.
Yeah, they are good fun, aren't they? I mean, my guess is also that, like, just how, as you had in the Death Guard, you had all of these weird new characters turning up. You'll have the equivalents for Slaanesh. So there's going to be some character that, like an apothecary equivalent that synthesizes toxins and narcotics from his victims and then drives his fellows into overcharge by injecting them with all sorts of things.
Right, gives Workshop Flesh Mop.
Flesh Mop, yeah. That needs to be the demon weapon of the Codex, doesn't it?
I demand to see a Flesh Mop on a demon prince.
But yeah, I mean, this is fascinating, because on the back of that, we've also got the stuff in Blackstone Fortress, which apparently there are going to be new Chaos Space Marine molds in there. We don't know quite what they are yet, but there's going to be quite a few. We know there's going to be 3 Chaos Space Marines, which are later going to be there's going to be like a full release of them for 40k.
Yeah.
And the rumor mill says the others are new Obliterators, which is interesting.
Do you know what I'm really hoping for? I'm hoping for a blue Space Marine, a yellow Space Marine, a red Space Marine. I'm hoping that you can have a Tarantula weapons platform. I'm hoping that you see some pre-Necron androids, and I hope that you see an Orc and a Gretchen, and I hope...
Well, isn't that what the early rumours said about this? That it was going to be...
that it was going to be Space Crusade.
It's going to be Space Crusade, isn't it? But what's also really interesting is the fact that it's set on one of the Blackstone fortresses. That suggests that they are gearing up to move the 40k timeline along, because the Blackstone fortresses are like they're apocalyptic weapons.
They are, yeah. They're the world enders, aren't they?
They are the world enders, yeah. So this is definitely gonna lead into like the new Abaddon and whatnot, and the new Black Legion stuff. So yeah, it's a very high time. It's a very heady, high, and anticipatory time to be a Chaos follower at the moment.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's a heady time to be a Games Workshop follower at the moment, which I think is probably the same thing as being a Chaos worshipper at this point. So I think with that then, we'll start closing things down. I've got a couple of little bits of housework to do. Pardon me. There we go. So I know that we have been away for a while. You have my apologies for that. It was completely and utterly
nothing
unavoidable. Nothing it's completely on me.
Real life,
that's fine.
Real life. It's what happens,
Yeah. But we are now back, and we are back properly. We have got loads of stuff coming up. We're going to be trying to get back to doing this as regularly as possible.
Certainly.
We're going to get back onto having discussions, me and George, about the Patreon and getting those shows done again. I still actually have an entire show ready to go for the Patreon, which is me and George talking about sex and sexuality in the 40k universe.
A fun one. That was a really interesting one.
It was. It's just with the way things have been over the last few months, there just hasn't been the time to get that done. But that will be coming out in the next month. You have my word. Over on the Facebook and on the Twitter, I have a competition running. And it's if you would like some Warhammer Age of Sigmar Champions cards, either a good starter booster deck or a good starter deck or a booster deck, you can win one. And over the next couple of episodes, I'm going to be reading out people's entries in the competition. And the competition is, I want Warhammer limericks.
Brilliant.
So I'm going to read you a few now, and I'll do this for the next couple of weeks as we go along, and then we'll pick a winner. So the first one we've got is from James Norfolk Sinnis. There was a young Auric from Gur, covered in small patches of fur. He traded his axe for a full body wax. When he moves, he's a shiny green blur.
That's brilliant. Well done. That very good. Very good. Yes, I like that one.
There once was a corn berserker who wanted to get a lot hurtier. So he picked up his axe, gave his teeth a good smash, and said, "Blood for the blood god." That's from Simon Skay. Another one from James. There was some young guardsman from Tharis who lost the keys for the field marshal's terrace when down on their knees looking for the keys. The commissioner shot them in the arses.
Very good.
And we also have an entry from Matt Clark that is less of a limerick and more of a life story, blaming me for all of his current spending on Warhammer stuff. So it didn't rhyme, Matt, so it doesn't count.
Although, yes, I mean, I feel we do have to apologise to anyone we've actually roped into this hobby.
Yeah, literally with a large butterfly net. Come with me. How are your Space Marines going, Rob? That's actually something that I didn't talk about, which is probably worth bringing up very quickly. So I met up with Taz from the Facebook group. Hi, Taz. And Andy, Mr. Millman, and Mr. Rob Coy. And we all met up at the Metro Centre's 25th anniversary store. We got to speak to one of the heavy metal team.
Brilliant.
We got to speak to one of the designers, the guy who created the Gorkamorka orcs.
Oh.
And it was a really, really fun day out. If you ever get a chance to go to a Games Workshop anniversary, I recommend
Good fun,
it.
yeah.
Very good fun. I managed to get a Bommler Dribble Snot.
Aha! Oh, God, that's a blast from the past.
Oh, yes, it is. It really is. But I'm going to try and hit more of these things as time goes on next year, because I think that they are good fun, and it's a good way of meeting up with people as well. Also, it's a great way for making your bank account cry.
Yup. And for kind of like gleaning little hints and tidbits. Although they're very good at being tight-lipped.
They are. They're very, very good. And I'm going to give the manager of that store a really, really big shout out, because I had a conversation with him very early in the morning about asking to do interviews with the guests. And he went out of his way to go and talk to the PR department to see if there was any way that it was manageable. Unfortunately not, but that's
brilliant. Well, at least, he tried, so brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, but the reasonings why we couldn't were, that is more than fine. It's at no point did I think, actually, that's a bit of a shame. That's, absolutely fine. I totally understand.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the fact that they went out of the way to do that, I was really impressed with. And I just want to give the Games Workshop Metro Centre in Newcastle a good old shout-out, because well done,
Fabulous.
guys. That was a really
good
good
stuff.
Day. Yeah. And of course, next Saturday, I don't know if we'll record next Saturday. I hope we will. Next Saturday, of course, is the 500th store anniversary day. So if you can get down to your Games Workshop, there is stuff happening in a lot of them. I know Armies on Parade is today. They have to move it because of next week. But next week there's going to be a big AOS games in mine. There's an Apocalypse level AOS game, which is bring 1,000 points and join in. So that's going to be quite good fun. And there's 2 miniatures which are exclusive to that day only. A really nice Nighthaunt Lady Grave Knight, and a Primaris.
Of course, it's a Primaris captain. It's always a Primaris captain.
Of course,
it's always a Primaris captain. You know what? I mean, on the subject of the Primaris, just incidentally, I've got a lot more time for them now since I've started reading about them a bit more. I like these guys. Yeah. I know there's a bit of pessimism about them. I really like them.
It's the same way that I got into Gilliman. Because you look at them from afar and they appear to be very dull. They are cookie cutter heroes. And then I read the Gilliman book, Dark Imperium. And for the first time ever, I got Gilliman and I got the Ultramarines in a way I've never got them before. And I love the idea that Gilliman actually had a blazing row with his dad.
Like blazing row, like like a tantrum, like an infant, almost like a tantrum. Not an unjustified one, but a tantrum nonetheless. You were wrong. You lied. You got it all wrong. it really, like, quite a vicious argument.
Well, it's the part that got me was he looked upon me as a smith looks upon his favourite hammer or something like that.
Yeah.
And at that point I realised he never loved me as a son. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a million miles away from what the traitor Primarchs were saying before they turned traitor, is it?
No, it's
not a million miles away. Same tensions and everything.
Magnus did nothing. Just to be down with the kids. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. I think
so. Yeah, but yeah, Primaris Marines, go and read the stuff on the Indomitus Crusade. It's actually really interesting. It is actually a good, fun bit of lore that they've introduced for the Primaris Marines and whatnot. And also one of my favourite Imperial characters, which is Belisarius Cawl.
Yeah, who is awesome. He is a fantastic big skittery monster.
I like him even more after reading about him in Guy Haley's Wolfsbane. Because in that he's very young, obviously, because that's at the beginning of the it's sort of towards the latter days of the heresy. He's lucky he doesn't get shot for treachery. He really is. He's a very naughty guy. Is the early Belisarius Cawl. Very naughty indeed.
I don't know if you've come across it, but I did a reading for the YouTube channel end of last year it was, and it's all about a young boy who was taken out of his training for the Imperial Guard. And he's stuck in a cryotube, and then he accidentally falls out of it.
Okay.
Now, you don't realise that this has happened, but the time scale for this story is thousands of years. And it's he comes out the tube, and he's running around trying to find out where he is, and he comes across Cawl. And Cawl, a lot of Cawl's part of the story is him working out what the best social reactions to give him would be.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where he just goes about, he adopts the friendly grandfather voice that he's used in the past to good effect.
Yeah. Cool.
But because you know who Cawl is, you know it's not he's putting on a voice. He's adopted an actual voice from his databanks.
It's so funny. Cawl is kind of like that, though. He's quite funny.
Mm-hmm.
He's got he
awesome.
actually has like a sense of humour, which is not something you automatically associate with the Master of Mars.
No. But, he just wanders around with his kid showing him the Primaris and stuff going, oh, do you want to be a hero, do you?
So funny. I love Belisarius, and I like him. He's one of my favourite Imperial characters, full stop. Really like him.
Yeah, I love him. I love him to bits. He's such a great addition to the 40k universe. And it's a strange one. I don't think he could have existed 20 years ago.
No. Well, the very notion of what he is, the notion that he kind of thought he could do better than the Emperor, and he kind of has done better than the Emperor.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, okay.
Which is an interesting evolution of 40k over the last decade, which is that the Emperor has been... He's been shown to be a lot more fallible than he was.
Massively so. And the universe is moving away from him.
And arrogant as well.
The universe itself is moving away from him, which I think is really cool. That's the way to do it.
It is. It really is. Anyhow, right.
Because that's an entire conversation in and of itself.
It really is. And I think that would be a really good Patreon exclusive episode, would be to talk about the Emperor and the evolution of him in the mythology.
Yeah, definitely.
But for now, we are going to remove ourselves from your airwaves and your earbuds, and we will see you next time. As always, thank you, George.
Absolute pleasure. It's brilliant to be back, especially given what we had to talk about today. It's an absolute pleasure.
I could have talked about the Beasts of Chaos for another hour.
Definitely.
Easy. And as always, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. Just go out there and just search the Fluffenhammer left, right, and centre, and we will be there, much like Marlet, the demon god. I can't even finish the sentence.
The demon god of banality, I think we came up with.
There we go.
Mallet.
Oh, I need breakfast. Take care, all. Bye-bye.